I'd like to welcome everyone to today's council meeting. We are a little bit late, but it was simply because we were having a very robust discussion in our RDA meeting. If anyone was able to tune in to that, I think it's an incredibly important discussion that we were having. And luckily, I think that we can still make it through our council meeting right on time. So thank you for apologies to the public and to the mayor for keeping you waiting, but thank you very much for understanding that it wasn't because we were just lollygagging around. We were certainly trying to make sure that we were getting the important work of the RDA done and having, like I said, important, robust discussions. We are grateful to have everyone joining us today as we do continue to hold electronic meetings. We welcome the members of the public who may be watching our usual video feeds. And even though we are not in person, the meeting is still considered an open and public meeting. As many of you know, there is no public comment during a work session. However, we will be having a formal session at 7 p.m. and we would encourage you to share any of your comments at that time. As always, your feedback is always welcome, and you can share that with the City Council anytime by mailing us at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114, or emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or by calling our 24-hour phone comment line at 801-535-7654. And we will now move into our work session items. First and foremost is updates from the administration. Again, Mayor Mendenhall, thank you so much for your patience and for joining us today. I will turn the time over to you and your staff.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I always appreciated a robust RDA discussion, as I know you do. We have had the request from council staff to kind of standardize some of the metrics that we've been bringing you verbally and submitting in different formats over time. So, oops, don't know where I went there. We're going to try to standardize what we bring you on COVID updates and homeless service outreach and all of that into a presentation. And so this is our first time sharing that with you, and we'll still invite and solicit your feedback to make sure that we're getting you information in the best way possible for you to consume and disseminate also to your communities you represent. So I think that council staff has that, and if they could pull it up. Thanks, Robert. Let's go to the second slide. Thank you. And I think you probably heard that our COVID endgame was just met according to the metrics that the legislature laid out. This was just announced in the last hour that the state of Utah has now received over the 1.633 something prime doses of the vaccine. And so now all of the authorities that cities and counties have had under the state's emergency mandate are gone. They sort of instantly vanish. But for our ability to implement restrictions on the city-owned facilities, as we have already done and Salt Lake County has done. So meaning any city-owned buildings, we can still enforce just as a business owner could enforce according to their own desires in their private place of business. Here's the metrics. And 84101 is still just under that target of 189 per 100,000 cases. We're at 191 there, but quite close. And we wanted to update you with the vaccination numbers for those hardest hit zip codes in Salt Lake City. You'll see that there are more people fully vaccinated than partially vaccinated, and we're grateful for that. So essentially you could combine the fully vaccinated and the partially vaccinated percentages for each zip code. So 84101 is about 65% vaccinated, either fully or partially, or about 30, there are dogs wrestling in the background here, 32% for 84104 and 36% or so for 84116. And on your agenda today is both an extension of the COVID emergency declaration that we've just talked about as we, per whatever authorities we have left, and a consideration of a temporary land use regulation that would allow outdoor dining and retail in public right of ways to continue. And our city attorney's office is happy and ready to explain why we are requesting those if you'd like us to dive into those details now, or we can go on to the second slide.
Madam Mayor, I think because we will be looking at this item a little bit later in the agenda, we could go to the next slide if that's okay.
Great. Here's an update on some of the vaccination clinic work that's happening in those specific zip codes. And we're looking at other ways that we can help incentivize organizations in our communities who need a higher rate of vaccination than we're currently having to host clinics at their upcoming events. And as always, council members, we'd love to hear from you and conversations that you have with community members if there's ways that we can help to facilitate and make those vaccination clinics happen. I'd like to tell you now about our employee numbers, if we can go to the next slide. And these are, again, slides that we hope to keep updating for you. You'll become familiar with them. But in total, we've had just over 1,200 total utilizations of the emergency responder pandemic leave. So those are just for our first responders as defined by the feds. And of those 1,200 or so utilizations, that represents about 514 employees. So 514 employees have used the ERPL over 1,200 times in total. So some people have used it 2 times, some people have used it 3 times. And that's to care for the members of their family who have COVID or are sick, or if they themselves have been exposed and have to quarantine, or they become sick themselves. When it comes to our other employees who aren't covered under the ERPL, that's where the FFCRA, that Federal Family First Coronavirus Act, comes in, and we've had 305 utilizations of that. And I wanted to mention also that the 1282 number, I'm sorry, the 514 number of total employees that have used ERPL is up 28 employees since our last payroll. So we've had 28 new employees access that. We can go to the next slide. This is just a little bit more detail on those 514 employees that we talked about utilizing the ERPL. By department, you can see that down on the green bar graph on the left side. And then the pie chart is interesting, where I told you that some employees have used it more than once, and this breaks out where only 4% of those 514 employees have accessed 100% of their potential ERPL leave, and it goes down from there so that you can see how much capacity is left in employees who have already used ERPL. We can go to the next slide, Bobby. Thank you. Sorry, I just lost my place there. And this is the same data, but for the non-first responder employees using the FFCRA, which is an extension of FMLA, really. Any questions on this section on our employees? Okay, then we can move on to the next slide for an update on homelessness. You heard, and thank you for all the council members who were able to make it to the press conference last week announcing our partnership with the Other Side Academy. And I had a great conversation with council chair this morning for our usual check-in meeting, talking about how distinctly different this partnership really is from those that we've executed in the past around homeless resource center creation, where the city was had an ownership in the property itself until the time that it opened, and a very different role in terms of the decision making around the creation of the building itself. with the Other Side Academy, we are partnering with them so that they can execute something that has never happened in the state of Utah before. And we know, you know very well, as the land use authority in the city, that there's a lot of paths that the city needs to help them navigate in order to be able to make this come to reality, from zoning and utilities and the coordination with the community wherever it may be sited. So we do not know where it will be just yet, but I know that the Other Side Academy is actively at work every day right now, trying to come to a determination on where a good site would be. And I'll just stress one more piece, which is the permanence that I have no interest in temporarily siting the tiny home pilot community somewhere. And we know from our city work that there's nothing more permanent than a temporary use. So it's important that we site it somewhere where it has the capacity to scale and grow, but I think most importantly that we can provide the permanence that we intend to offer those who are currently chronically homeless in Salt Lake City, of a stable and a solid home. Yesterday, we announced the creation of a volunteer corps for Salt Lake City, and Haley in our office, who ran the census coordination for the city over 2019 and 2020, she is now helping to create the SLC Corps, and it's the potential for this is tremendous. We have a very strong volunteer ethic, as you know, in our communities here in Salt Lake City, and we want to bring the city's coordinating efforts to the advantage of all the needs that we see in the community and put this volunteer work out there for good. So the first effort is around the Magnolia Project. You know that's we're excited about that opening, and the city partnered to make that happen. 65 new residents will be entering their permanent supportive homes later this year when it opens. And so the first opportunity with SLC Corps is asking people to collect kitchen supplies. We will be sharing with you, if we haven't already, the link, and it takes people to an Amazon page and they can see what those kitchen items are, but they absolutely can get them from anywhere, and they can be gently used or new to set people up in their kitchens. And the last piece of that, you already know the commitment that Salt Lake City's made to help the Magnolia permanent supportive housing come online. All right, Bobby, we could go to the next one. Thank you. Our most recent resource fair was on April 27th. There was really limited interest in the group that was engaged there in the shelter options that were presented. Although some of them did move into the Airport Inn ahead of the abatement that happened at the end of the engagement. So here's some of the stats for you, and the abatement that is happening currently on 6 South and 4th West, as you know, is on private property, and the health department has been working with the city and those owners to close that location to camping today. Our last slide is kind of a culmination of the data that you can get at any point in time on the city's dashboard on homeless services, and with which has also CCP information. When I say it's accumulation, it's because it's April 26th through the 30th, where on the dashboard it's just any single night. So we appreciate that Michelle Hoon worked with the service providers to bring these numbers together. And I know that the council's requested treatment bed occupancy trends and shelter bed trends. And we're going to work to keep this information coming to you in this format, or whatever you might request that would be better for you. But you can see those percentages over the last week of data that we could pull for this. Any questions or suggestions for feedback on how you're receiving this information?
I have a question on that. So now that we have that you and all of us have been able to collect those numbers, that we know an average how many unoccupied beds there are at night at the HRCs. So how does that translate with people that are still camping and do not want to go to the shelters.
You mean with the constitutional limitations that are fluidly in place based on occupancy? I'll actually lean on Rachel, who claims to not be an attorney anymore, but she can speak to that always better than I can.
Councilmember Valdemoris, as we've discussed before, enforcing the camping ordinance is a tool, is one tool that we have. And as the mayor just said, depending on where our occupancy numbers are, and if we have a good faith or we can show that we've offered somebody shelter that's available, that is a tool that we can use. As you see, the numbers are in the 80 to 90 percentages. So depending on the time of the day that shelter is offered, it may or may not legitimately be available based on the way that the providers track beds and when beds do open in the system. So it gets a little bit more complex, of course, as always, than just being able to look at the straight numbers, but it's a tool that we can use if we need to use it and we feel confident that we have a place for people to go.
And so you will use it, or you have tried or you've already used it?
Well, not to, I'm not sure if you want to go down the path of the philosophical discussion around it, but it sometimes gets difficult to, yes, we can cite people for camping in areas, and that's definitely something we can do. Whether that then translates into us being able to forcibly remove them or take them to jail for an hour or so is kind of sets into motion a different precedent. And then there's the conversation that we could have around, issuing a Class B misdemeanor. Does that, ultimately result in something that helps us system-wide for getting people off the streets? So
Right.
the tools don't always result in the thing that, we may want to achieve.
Or does the accumulation of misdemeanors for camping and other activities make it ultimately a lot harder for us to place people into housing and become a sort of perverse way of going about solving homelessness? Honestly, we're not going to take any tools off the table, and this has been a dynamic situation in our capital city since the week before I came into office, when we had an encampment crop up on Washington Square for the first time maybe in decades. And it's going to keep evolving as we work with the new state homeless coordinator, Wayne Niederhauser, and as Andrew Johnston comes on board May 10th for the city. I think we have some big conversations and work to do with the state around what a better coordinated approach will be than the reality we have right now, which is the fact that cities and counties around the state are transporting individuals experiencing homelessness to Salt Lake City and dropping them off here because there's not enough services or access to permanent supportive or transitional housing where they are at. And that's simply unsustainable.
And Mayor, may I add something here? I think oftentimes, excuse me, what you just said is oftentimes overlooked, in that I sometimes feel that people think that Salt Lake City is simply complaining about something. But in reality, what you just stated is 100% accurate. Having worked in Summit County and have a probation provider say, well, we can take this person to Salt Lake City because we just don't have the resources here. It is, and that is with housing, it's with treatment, it's with our social services, and I mean, I was in court just like mind blown that somebody actually said this. And so I think it oftentimes is overlooked at the work that Salt Lake City is doing, and the burden that's not burden, but the responsibility that we have and are trying to really take care of. And so I thank you for bringing that up, and I hope that with the Wayne Niederhauser's new position, we will be able to really encourage other communities to do the work that they need to do for their communities as well, and help us out, because it really isn't just Salt Lake City complaining. This is very much happening for Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County. And I do think that sometimes that's overlooked as like, oh, hush, hush, go do your job. And so I appreciate you saying that, Mayor. I think you're muted, Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. That's all for our update today, because I know that you have Chief Brown and Deb Alexander later on your agenda. So when they're not in your later agenda, we will also include some police updates in the future.
Perfect. And thank you so much for that presentation. I think for many of us who are visual learners, it helps kind of see what your words actually mean, and it sticks with me a little bit more. So I appreciate the work that your staff has done on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Me too. Thanks.
With that, we will go on to agenda item number 2, updates on racial equity and policing. And I believe Allison is here to give us a quick update. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you. Just 2 quick items of note. One is that tomorrow, May 5th, the full commission will be meeting at 5 p.m. That's, as we always say, a meeting that's open to the public, including council members. So tune in if you would like to see that. The second thing is we wanted to remind you that the commission has scheduled another listening session on May 19th at 6 p.m. So I hope all of you will mark your calendars, get all excited to be able to attend this listening session as well. And we're happy to provide more information. Staff is happy to provide more information should you need it. That's all we have for today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Allison.
Sure.
Item number 3 is something that the mayor mentioned a little bit, and that is the ordinance permitting certain outdoor business activities and use of certain temporary structures. I think that we've all appreciated dining outside during the time of COVID, both me as a patron and my friends who own small businesses. So I will turn it over to Nick Tarbett to talk about this from the council office. We also have Katie Lewis and Ben Colander, Katie, our city attorney, and Ben, the director of economic development. So I will turn it over to Nick. I think. I don't see.
Actually,
Nick.
Madam Chair, I think we were going to rely on the admin to cover this, since it was such a quick turnaround. If Katie doesn't mind.
You're on the spot.
Hi, council members. Nice to see you. I've got Kimberly Chitris with me today. And we thought we would start with sort of the high level overview, which I know you know because the mayor just discussed it. And in fact, the thresholds have been met, as the mayor mentioned. But you probably recall that Salt Lake City, the mayor had the authority to issue a local COVID emergency, which she did about 16 months ago. And the council has the authority to extend that after 30 days and has done so throughout the past 16 months. And in fact, you have an extension on your agenda, your formal agenda for tonight. The reason for that is because the most recent extension expires May 5th. Because the thresholds have been met today, there's actually no reason to extend it, because the COVID emergency terminates automatically when the 3 thresholds established by HB 294 have been met, which they were today. So what that means is that the all of the exercises of emergency powers that the mayor has chosen to do over the past 16 months also go away unless the council or the administration take action to continue them. And what you have before you today is an extension of one in particular, actually two emergency proclamations that were intended to help local businesses and restaurants operate safely and in a socially distant way. The temporary land use regulation addresses both outdoor retail and restaurant activities and temporary structures. With that, I will hand it over to Kimberly to talk a little bit about the distinctions between the temporary land use regulation and some administrative policy changes that the city attorney's office is recommending, because not everything that was done under the emergency proclamations fall neatly within land use, and that's what a temporary land use regulation is for. So I'll hand that over to Kimberly. If council members have questions about the other emergency proclamations that now no longer are in effect as of today, I'm also happy to talk about that. And I see that Ben is here to talk about the policy priorities that will hopefully be achieved by passing this temporary land use regulation. So with that, unless there are any immediate questions, I'm happy to hand it over to Kimberly for a more detailed discussion.
Kimberly, before we get to you, Katie, just a quick clarification. These are emergency proclamations relating to COVID. Do we still have emergency proclamations in place that were in relation to the windstorm and or the earthquake? And if so, those still remain intact?
All three of the local emergencies, so the windstorm, COVID-19, and the earthquake, had most recently been extended until May 5th. And the administration concluded that the windstorm and the earthquake local emergencies did not need to be extended, because really the purpose of keeping those in place was to ensure that we got federal or state emergency funding. So those two actually will terminate tomorrow as well. And then of course the COVID-19 emergency will terminate pursuant to state law today.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Thanks, Katie. Kimberly, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm just here to answer questions about what we're doing with the temporary land use regulation and the difference between the administrative policies. So in your materials, you have a chart that we used to simplify what goals we thought were trying to be accomplished when the emergency proclamations were passed, and then how we are proposing to continue to meet those same goals as we move forward out of the emergency proclamations. So you can see the first thing we wanted to do was allow outdoor dining on private property. That's a function of our zoning code. It is allowed in the zoning code, but we wanted to allow some use on existing side yards and parking lots, which might not be clearly allowable under the zoning code. And so we had waived some changes in the emergency proclamation, and then the temporary land use regulation you have in front of you will allow temporary use to accommodate the CDC safety, basically distancing guidelines. So if a business, a restaurant has private property they want to expand onto, they can do that as long as the CDC regulations are in place, and they can do it at a rate greater than they could do under the existing zone code. That's our first change. The second one also has to do with private property, and this has to do with allowing outdoor retail businesses. So what we've done is the same thing. We've allowed outdoor businesses, retail businesses, to expand onto their private property. They're not typically allowed to do this under the zoning code, which is why it falls under the temporary land use regulation. So this is if they wanted to do some small scale retail racks, display tables, things like that. If there was a spacing issue in a retail store, they can expand onto the private property that's accessible and immediately adjacent to them. The next thing that was allowed in the emergency proclamation, and those two first things were accomplished by emergency proclamation number 11. This third thing was allowed by emergency proclamation 17, which was allowing temporary structures to be built on private property. And if the structure was not more than 200 square feet, then it didn't have to get a temporary use permit. we will continue to allow temporary freestanding structures on private property. And there will not be the permit fees, these as we set forth in the temporary land use regulation. That the temporary land use regulation will address the private property. And then there's an administrative policy we'll get to next, which will make some accommodation for businesses who want to place temporary canopies in the right of way. Do we have any questions yet on the temporary land use regulation? Yes, Councilmember Mano.
I'm just wondering what temporary structure, is there like a number of days that constitutes a temporary structure? Can a temporary structure be up for 5 years or something?
Under the zoning code, you can't have it up more than 45 days a year. I think, you know, this was originally enacted last, gosh, I was going to say December, but it was probably earlier than that. And the idea really had to do with snow and weather. Obviously, the use of the temporary structure going forward in spring and summer would be different than it is in the winter, but the zoning code does prohibit it more than 45 days. I think is the number. Okay, so the next portion of this chart deals with an administrative policy that governs outdoor dining permits. The idea here is we have always allowed outdoor dining permits so that restaurants can put tables and chairs in the right of way during their business hours. The permit is fairly affordable. It has been charged on an annual basis, and that charge is included in the consolidated fee schedule. What we did under the emergency proclamation is allow the fees to be charged on a pro rata basis. So when this first came out, we said you could do it for up to 6 months. And so we would charge 6 months instead of the full year to make it a more affordable permit. It's about like on either side of $150 now. And it depends for a restaurant on how many tables, sets of tables and chairs they put in the right of way. So we wanted to make that a little bit easier and to continue allowing that pro rata fee basis. So we're working with the administration on revising the policy so that a business could apply for the permit for however many months they want to use it during the year and pay the pro rata amount that's on the consolidated fee schedule. And then the last thing was retail business use has not been permitted in the right of way, and the emergency proclamation expanded so that you could have some small scale retail use in the right of way. And we would like to continue that through an administrative policy change where it's a small scale retail, meaning probably up to 200 square feet of the right of way could be used for things like merchandise racks and display tables. The outdoor dining permit, and now we would be changed to an outdoor business permit going forward. And it would be administered the same way as outdoor dining permits always are, which is a review with a number of departments and divisions within the city to make sure that we're not conflicting with another use of the right of way. But it's to make it a little bit more easy for businesses to use the right of way that they're connected to. One thing I'll note too is the temporary land use regulation expires in 6 months. And I think right now the direction is those changes do not need to be permanently made to the zoning code, but that the 6 months will get us through this emergency period. The outdoor business permit is anticipated to be a change going forward so that other businesses, other retail businesses can access this permit.
Kimberly, I have a quick question, if I may, unless council members have a question before. In the table, and something you mentioned is that to accommodate CDC guidelines for social distancing. Is this similar to what we're seeing in the state right now today, that if the CDC social distancing guidelines go away, then the temporary land use goes away, or is it in effect for 6 months no matter what?
I think it would be in effect for 6 months, but if the CDC stopped advising social distancing or the, staying away from people not in your immediate family, I think the idea would be that it wouldn't be needed to continue the expansion into the private property.
So if we were to see that the CDC came out and said everything's back to normal in 3 months, I mean, I'm not expecting that. I just looking at, would this then come back to the council to expire or to terminate this temporary land use, or is that an administrative function to determine that it would be terminated? I'm just looking at logistics.
That's a good question. I don't think it needs to come back. I think it would expire automatically if there's no longer distancing required. We tried to really narrowly tailor the temporary land use regulations so that we weren't causing some unanticipated effects on other businesses. And so that's why it's tied to the CDC distancing guidelines. And that's, I think, the basis for needing the extra space in the private property.
Thank you. Council members, do you have other questions on this particular, on the table that Kimberly just outlined? Okay, and then Ben, I don't know if you wanted to add some words here. Words back.
Thank you, Council Chair. I just wanted to thank the council for their swift support and consideration of this. This is something that we've heard from the business community and our business advisory board as well, that this is something for us to give some special attention to because it's been a helpful tool in helping businesses recover from the pandemic. So just want to say thank you. And that one other thing, most of the businesses that have utilized this, it's an overwhelmingly high amount of local businesses. Most of our franchises or larger businesses don't necessarily have this sort of intent or focus. So it's really supporting our local businesses in our economy as well. So thanks again for the support and the consideration. Happy to answer any other questions though.
Great. I was just going to say, I anticipate it's the breweries and distilleries that are getting a lot of use out of this as well. Or is that just from me? Just kidding. Darren, did you have it?
I
Question?
guess I would just want to discuss whether some aspects of this should become permanent, because if it's helping businesses during a pandemic, it seems like it could help them other times of the year as well. And I realize that there may be some unintended or some other consequences that we're able to accept that we wouldn't be, but so it might not look the exact same. But if it's about helping businesses and also, I mean, I'm always focused on trying to activate the street, and I can't think of a better way to activate the street than actually literally activating the open space in front of the street. So I, for one, would be interested in discussing before this expires whether some of it should remain permanent.
Well, I really appreciate that question, Councilmember Mono. And if I can just say, recovery for many of our local businesses is going to go beyond just the pandemic. Many businesses have had to take on debt and reduce capacity for some time now. And so this could be a tool to help through recovery as well as the activation. And I think there's another element to just thank the council for in supporting some of the open streets efforts that have been taking place. I think that's another way to reach that activation that you're talking about. And that's definitely, this provision can help support that as well. Even though I have to say that's done through the special event permitting process. So a different process altogether, but same concept.
Do you mind if I add too, to the extent there's elements of the temporary land use regulation that the council and administration determine would be helpful in a business recovery, and they want to, you want to bring something forward, that would just have to go through the land use process. And so it would just be a new ordinance that's taken to planning commission and then brought to the city council.
Which we all know how long that takes, so we should start now if we want to do that.
Great. Are there other questions on this, council members? I don't see any. So we are, I believe, set to take action on this tonight in our formal meeting. So there you go. Thank you, Katie and Kimberly and Ben, for joining us on this. We will move on to our next agenda item, which is our policing discussion. As the public and or council members and people out there in the virtual world that listen and care about Salt Lake City, we have started sort of a, I want to say almost monthly discussion with our police department about different things that the police department is doing. And this comes from, I think, a long awaited discussion that we've been having over the last year or so. And so different aspects from the police department have been brought as a briefing in the different, in the last couple of months. And this month we are talking about officer training and promotions. I think this has been a really good discussion for people to really understand what has happened, what is happening, and maybe get some ideas for all of us of what can happen in the future and what we are hoping to change and what we're working on changing. So I want to thank the chief for taking time out and meeting with us today. We also have Ben Ludke, our council office policy analyst, and I believe Deb Alexander is here. Yep, I see her title, our HR director. So I will first turn it over to Ben and we'll go from there. Thanks, everyone.
As you mentioned, Madam Chair, this is the next in a series of briefings the council is holding about policing topics. The first was in January about the social worker program. Then in March, the council talked about police officer recruitment and hiring. These past discussions are available to watch, or if you want to read the materials, it's available on the council's Racial Equity and Policing webpage. The videos are also on YouTube. The discussion today is about trainings and promotions. I thought it would be helpful to give some quick background and reminders on this topic. Back in fiscal year 2015, this is 6 years ago, the council funded a use of force simulator for officer training. The training technology has evolved significantly since then. Over the past several years, the council also funded additional trainings for officers. Some examples are de-escalation training, working with survivors of sexual assaults, and leadership development for officers. HR has been developing new rules for promotions since the council eliminated the Civil Service Commission in December. You'll hear about those new rules today. Recently, the REP Commission issued training recommendations. These include target outreach to increase the diversity of the field training officer program, require crisis intervention team or CIT training for all police officers, and require that the officers maintain that certification. Another recommendation from the REP Commission was to create a training for police officers to learn about the history and culture of the diverse communities and neighborhoods in the city. With that, I'll turn the time over to Chief Brown, who is going to start with a presentation on training, and then we'll go to Deb Alexander, who has another presentation about promotions. Chief?
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Madam Chair and Council. It's always good to be with you. Thanks for the time. I'd also like to introduce Lieutenant Alma Sweeney. Alma, are you on? Your camera on? There he is.
Yes, it is.
Thanks, Alma, for being here. He's the lieutenant over the training unit and does a fantastic job. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, just like Ben talked or introduced, the Salt Lake City Police Academy and what we accomplish, and kind of the nuances of the recommendations given to us by REP and what we're trying to accomplish through those recommendations and the things that have transpired over the last little while. But to talk first, I think we should maybe explain a little bit about what we do in the training, what we do here in the Salt Lake City Police Academy. Just to give you, to kind of go back in my career, in 1991, I hired on this month as a brand new officer. I shaved off my mullet and I embarked in a career in law enforcement. The best decision I ever made, two best decisions I ever made: get rid of the mullet and get into police work. Anyway, at that time, I hired on with Salt Lake City PD, but they sent us to a post academy. So we went out to post for an entire academy. Well, that's changed immensely over the years. Right now, as far as Salt Lake City is concerned, we now host our own state certified police academies. And there are really three components to that training that we do. The first part is a special functions officer, or an SFO track. It entails 240 hours of classroom training. And we talk about some of the courses that we discuss are ethics, leadership, Utah Criminal Code, laws of arrest, defensive tactics, conflict resolution. Once you're through that part of the academy, you're SFO or a special function officer trained, which means you can, you have limited police powers. If you're writing, some agencies have a reserve program where officers that go through this block of training can ride with a certified officer and they can go out and do patrol work. But most of SFO work is done in like reserve programs or in jail transport or protective services. The next block that we teach is the law enforcement officer LEO track, and it's 348 hours of training. Again, the topics include emergency vehicle operations, EVO, firearms, report writing, all the different investigative needs and defensive tactics. Completion of this portion of training allows an officer to actually be certified as a full-time police officer when they become sworn or hired by a city or county. Now, those are the two state certified or required post curriculums or academies that are required for law enforcement. Salt Lake City has always taken it one step further. So back in 1991, after doing our post certification or post academy, we came to Salt Lake City PD and had our own academy. And we still do the very same thing here. Remember that policing in Salt Lake City is a little different than maybe policing elsewhere in the state. The post curriculum really has to meet the needs of the entire state, from a rural agency up to an agency like Salt Lake City. But it's just foundational, and it's within the Salt Lake City Academy or curriculum that we develop out, and we really take the training to another level. That training consists of 254 hours. And it's not a separate academy, but it's interwoven into the classes we teach. We really flesh out training for the different investigations that we do here: domestic violence, special victims, specific policies and procedures that are relevant to Salt Lake City. And Ben spoke about, but in this part of the academy, the training that that was graciously funded by and supported by the council is the fair and impartial policing, the Arbinger training, and the Blue Courage training that we've built into our academy as well. And then on top of that, all the academies that we host here at Salt Lake City, before they ever leave our academy, we put them through the CIT training curriculum, which is another 40 hours. So really, we take all those curriculums, and it's a 22-week academy from start to finish. Once they graduate from our academy, and that includes the SFO function, the LEO, and then the Salt Lake City curriculum, they then move into an 18-week FTO program. So with that being said, Ben, can you put up our slide? I'm sorry, we didn't even put that up.
I think Bobby has that power.
Okay, Bobby, thanks. Well, anyway, that was the first slide that I just went through. And then I'd like to turn it over to Alma, slide number 2. And council, as we go through, if you have any questions, let's ask them as we go. That way you don't have to hold them to the end and we have to circle back. So please just jump in wherever you'd like. Lieutenant, up to you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate this time. We've been asked what the pros and cons of running our own in-house academy are. First, I'll go over some of the pros. First off, we are able to train our officers to a higher standard. As the chief mentioned, this is a 22-week academy, but that's a minimum number of hours. We have been able to extend the academy when we feel they need additional instruction for a particular area. If they need more time to develop certain skills, we're able to extend those hours beyond the minimum requirements of post. Again, with the inclusion of all the other hours, the 254 hours that we weave in there with our own Salt Lake City curriculum. We're also able to focus on policing in Salt Lake City. This includes the detectives coming in and teaching a lot of our classes. The majority of our instructors that we have for the in-house academy have to be certified through post through an instructor development course. But we're able to have our own officers within Salt Lake City come and teach that curriculum. So when we have detectives come and teach them about robbery, they're able to present cases that we've dealt with here in Salt Lake City, some of the lessons that we've learned, and we're able to have a greater focus on policing in Salt Lake City by maintaining our own in-house academy. We're also able to train a larger group of officers. A few months ago, we tried to get some of our officers into a post academy because we needed to certify, or we had the ability to certify some, and we were only provided, I think, 2 to 3 spots. Currently, we are running an in-house academy right now that started out with 26 officers. For us to be able to do that, we would have had to wait several months, if not years, to be able to get those 26 officers certified. So by running our own in-house academy, we are able to certify and train a larger amount of recruits. Now, there are some cons to running our own in-house academy. First is we have limited training facilities. To give you some insight into Post Academy, they have an entire campus that is attached to Salt Lake City Community College. It's a couple blocks where they have a larger range. They have building facilities that they can train in. For us, for our in-house academy, we are running it out of the Pioneer Precinct, which is limited in size, limited in amount of things that we can do with those recruits. The facilities do limit the amount of training that we're able to provide and the efficacy of the training. There's also a substantial time commitment that we have. As we said, it's a minimum of 22 weeks. That ties up our staffing through the instructors, through the detectives. There is a great time commitment and limited resources that we have to be able to provide this. We've been able to manage it through good calendaring, but there is the restriction on time and resources that is a con to running our own in-house academy. We believe that the pros significantly outweigh the cons, but we wanted to point some of those out to the city council so you're aware of what some of the restrictions are that we have in the training. Are there any questions about the pros or cons that we have with our in-house academy? Okay. All right, we'll talk about the impacts related to increased mandatory training. As we learn things, as we have seen some cases across the nation, cases within Salt Lake City, there becomes more push for mandatory training for police officers, which is good. We want more training. We want the officers to be more trained. But we think it's important that the city council and the citizens understand that every increase of mandatory training takes away some of our ability to provide some of those other critical training needs that are not labeled mandatory. Those needs have also increased as well. As technology has evolved, as understanding of the people that we deal with has evolved, the things that we have to train our officers is also evolving, and we're running out of some of the time to be able to train adequately everything that we would like to. To provide some insight into that, I just checked the postings this morning, and there have been 119 line of duty deaths this year throughout the nation, including assaults, crashes, gunfire, stabbings. Those are all things that we need to train our officers on how to adequately handle, how to provide the best officer safety to them. We have that obligation to the officers of our city to provide that training. And as the mandatory training needs increase, that's less time that we have to provide some of those other life-saving or critical training needs to the officers throughout our department. Not to say that the mandatory stuff isn't important, but there is we're having to prioritize what we're able to provide the officers, what training we're able to provide the officers. And Chief, I believe you were going to take this last bullet.
Yeah, and Lieutenant, thank you. Council, I wanted you to know, and maybe we can have a discussion on this, or there may be questions later, but the more training we do, every time we have a training, we have to take the officers off the street and have them go to that training. As we do more and more with training, we have to assign more officers to the training unit because, if we expect them to do more work, and they're doing fantastic, they're stretched very, very thin, but to do the work and train adequately in the way we want, we've assigned a few more officers to the training unit. So really, it comes down to, I'll give you an example. I went to a lineup the other morning, and I was sitting in the lineup room, and there were limited numbers. The numbers were small, and I was just asking where everybody was, and they said, well, we have this officer or these officers are in this training this week, and these officers are in this training. So it's really a balancing act when we want to assign, we want to do these trainings, and when we assign officers to the training unit, those officers come from somewhere, and they still have an obligation and duty to answer those calls for service. So we're doing the best we can, but it is staffing intensive to do the training that we want to do and that we're required to do. Next.
All right, we wanted to give you guys an understanding of how we maintain those training hours. It's required by the state that an officer maintain at least 40 hours of training throughout the year. How we do that in Salt Lake City is first we have our trimester training that encompasses 30 hours of training a year. And it's broken down into every 4 months. There's a training day that officers will come to. We pull them from the street from their regular assignments, and they come to a training that we provide for them. This is where we're able to cover those mandatory training topics, where we implement equipment changes or updates. An example would be we recently transitioned to a new Taser 7, and so we had to provide that training to all of the department. So we were able to take care of that in our trimester training. This is where we also provide that additional critical training for officers. The way that we're doing it right now is we're breaking up the morning portion for the more hands-on training, the scenario-based training, and the afternoon session is where we have more of the classroom training where we're able to do some of those updates or transitions to different equipment. That's how we currently have it broken up. Again, that's 30 hours that is offered to officers throughout the year, with the understanding that they need to acquire 10 additional hours to meet that post standard. This is accomplished through our policy or law updates that are put out over Lexipol, which is a case law type system, or Cornerstone, where we're able to put videos on there that they can view. Again, this is more the classroom type stuff, not the hands-on critical training that we like to offer, but it provides some of those updates to the officers. The other way that they can get their hours is to going to outside agency training. We like to send officers to this training because this is how we maintain a standard of keeping up to date on our current trends, the new programs that are out there, as well as additional certifications that we want those officers to maintain or to receive so that they can bring that information back to our department, and we can then offer it if it's something that we believe to be valuable. We offer it to the rest of the department, implementing it into our trimester training as we go throughout the year. Any questions about the training or how that is offered to officers throughout the year? All right.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Next slide, please. All right. If you're going to change the culture of policing, you're going to start with training. And if it's important to the community we serve, I want you to know it's important to us. And 6 months ago, we took a captain, Captain Scott Morkos, and we assigned him to training. That's the first time that we've ever had a training captain exclusively over the training division. I think it was a great move because through his leadership and Lieutenant Sweeney's leadership, we've developed some really, I think, important components to our training. There are 4 new pieces in place, and the first is reality-based training. Captain Morkos brought this concept to training based off of data and research on how people and adults learn. What we do is we take officers in small groups, and we set up training sessions throughout the day shift, afternoon shift, graveyard shift, so that officers can take time away from patrol for 15 or 20 minutes and go through these scenarios. They're as real life as possible. They induce stress, all the components of maybe doing it on the street. But the intention is to take these reality-based trainings and to allow officers to practice so that when they're on the street or they get into a situation like that, they make correct decisions. it's been a great tool. We focused on, and Alma, maybe you can jump in here. We focused on some de-escalation training and techniques over the last few months, and we'll continue picking different topics and scenarios as we go. But this has been very important in changing changing the culture, so to speak, or in collaborative reform efforts. DOJ has done a lot of studies on this and basically said this is really an important concept in how an agency can really move the needle when they want to really ramp up their training. And it really focuses on adult learning strategies. It's moderate frequency, short term. It has a much more a longer lasting, continually month after month after month. Is there anything you want to add in there, Lieutenant?
Yeah, so I believe one of the greatest assets that we have in our department right now are some of our sergeants who are every day with their squads. What we're doing to incorporate them into this reality-based training is at the first of the month, we will send out what the scenario is going to be with some attached training videos. They'll be able to watch these videos and then cover some of this information that they have with their squads, what they would do different, what they thought was good. And then when they come to participate with that hands-on training, we will have the sergeants there watching so that they can see what their officers are doing, see what they need to focus on a little bit more with their squads, provide some of that input to their squads as they go, since they're the ones that are with them every shift that they're working. And we're trying really hard to incorporate the line level supervisors into that training. Anything else on reality-based training that you wanted to touch on? Okay. So in addition to providing those, we recently, within the last couple months, implemented a 40-hour Sergeants Academy. We realized that as we're promoting our officers to sergeant, that we needed to provide some more training to them. And we really wanted to get everyone throughout our department, our supervisors, on the same page with what is expected of them as a supervisor. This was a 1-week course where it included supervisor expectations, leadership styles, scene management, and just the practical topics that a new sergeant needs to be aware of. Some of those included things that we had individuals sit on panels where they were able to ask them questions of what they wish they would have done different as they were a new sergeant, what they learned, what they wish they would have learned earlier in their career, to provide some of that practical feedback to our new sergeants so that we have the highest caliber of sergeants possible with our line level officers. We also wanted to incorporate more training for our current supervisors. And this meant that we put some of that training into our trimester training this year, where it was specific to the supervisors. The supervisors had to attend this block of training. Right here, we were able to focus on supervisor and management responsibilities. Again, getting our line level supervisors on the same page with what the expectations are, as well as how to use some of the new programs that have come out recently and how to be the best supervisor that they can be for their officers. For the officers, we're also offering more outside agency training where we are actually hosting the training. I've been in contact with FEMA and HIDA, who are both national providers of training, and they've been able to offer some of these training courses to us where we, with the HIDA training, get some spots available by hosting that training, as well as bringing the training in that we think is appropriate and important to our police departments. With FEMA, they are going to be bringing some more active shooter incident management training to the police officers, where we're going to be hosting that in the 1st of June, and where it's going to be a large training with multiple people throughout the valley that we think is going to be really good. HIDA is bringing in more investigative type training, where it's more classroom training where they're presenting to the officers, and we're able to sign up a large number of officers from our department to attend these trainings. I think it's important that the City Council understands we have had to turn trainings away for our police officers. People have wanted to host training here, but due to our limited resources, our limited staffing, we have had to turn trainings away because we just don't have the training facilities that are needed to be able to provide that training. That is one of the things that we would like to work on that would be a significant impact on the officers if we were able to improve that. So that we are able to host more of these, so that we're able to provide more of those trainings as a training unit and improve the quality of officers that we're putting out there throughout Salt Lake City.
Thanks, Lieutenant. And I just want to touch on that Sergeants Academy. That was great training. I heard throughout the department how much those that went appreciated it. And in the council, I just want you to know how important it is that we have the best best sergeants out there, because that's the first line of supervisors to our officers on the street. So that was great training. Next. Oh, hold on. Just real quick. This is where I'd like to, Ben, you introduce something, and I'd like to have my esteemed colleague, Deb Alexander, jump in here. But the Rep Commission made a suggestion or a recommendation that we look at training from and about the communities in which we serve. So kind of a grassroots training that would be educational to the officers, to teach them of the different communities we serve, to have membership from those communities. People from diverse backgrounds talk about how important the cultures are. And so not to miss, I scheduled a meeting with Dr. Prosperos and Commissioner Tanya Hawkins, and I can't remember, there was another commissioner there, Commissioner Steve Andrew Warden, to talk about what that training would look like. And so in talking about it, it really came down to they felt like this may be something that would be professionally done, but it also may have a component for the entire city. And so in talking with Deb Alexander on Friday, we talked a little bit more about that. And Deb, I think you have a couple ideas on that.
Yes, just to add to what you said, when you and I talked about it on Friday, we were talking about it as maybe initially or primarily a training for the police department, but I love the idea of it for all employees in the city. Just, you know, new employees as they're hired into the city would have an opportunity to learn about the different parts of the city, kind of the history of it, and as we could make it applicable for everyone. So it was an idea that I thought was super interesting, super exciting, and would be great for an audience outside of even PD.
All right, thanks, Deb. Any questions, council?
Council members, do you have any questions? Chief, I have a question about training.
Mhm.
Why not? Well, I kind of have two questions. First, the turning away of certain training because of lack of facilities. This is the first I'm hearing about that, so I'm curious. And two, why not bring in or have on as a consultation or a third party that isn't SLCPD? Why not? I mean, I think there is certainly some benefit to having a peer sort of session, if you will. I think it is always, I mentor new lawyers, and I do not, I'm not trying to not value the, or degrade the value of having a mentorship or a mentor program wherein you can ask these questions in a safe space. What did you learn as a sergeant, or what do I need to know, or here's an experience I had. But as far as the training itself, wouldn't having a third party where SLCPD is sort of outside of it be valuable as well?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think it would, and I think, and Lieutenant, maybe you can jump in here. There are certain topics that are taught by law enforcement or peer-to-peer or supervisor to peer, but I think they bring in professionals from all different disciplines to teach many of the classes in the academy. But that is a concept that we could build upon. It would certainly be worth looking into. Absolutely. As far as the facilities, I know we've talked about this with previous administrations. And building out a training facility, the needs that we need for an EVO track, a range. We just recently, well, it wasn't just recently, several years ago, we lost the range we had up at Parley's. And so we're now limited to the Pioneer Precinct range, which is just 5 lanes. So we're now renting space from Murray PD or the state. So I think it's a great discussion to start talking about building out our own academy to meet the needs of Salt Lake City.
And to further answer your question about a third party, We see tremendous value in that. That's what we try to accomplish with sending individuals to outside agency training, whether it's a law enforcement training or not. We're trying to get the perspective of outside of Salt Lake City so that we make sure that we're up on those current trends and receiving the training and not just insulated to what we are aware of. We would like to bring in more of those third-party trainers or those third-party perspectives. One of the things that we run into is if it's a police-related topic, it's hard to bring in a third-party individual that's not related or doesn't have the experience in policing. That's one of the issues that we run into. That's why we try to send them to outside agencies to receive that training. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. Okay. So what about, doesn't the fire department, they do their own training, right? And they also train other fire departments around the state and some from out of state. Is that something that our police department could do if, as you know, to generate revenue, to help offset the cost of having our own department?
Yeah, we would love to do that. We think that we're in the forefront of policing, and we don't have the opportunity as much to present that to other people. You look at one of the differences between the fire department and us, and the fire department has a training facility. They have a large training facility where they were able to host some of those trainings. They're able to bring people in for those trainings. We do not currently have that. Therefore, we're not able to provide some of that the fire department is.
And like, what else is there other than like a shooting range? Like, what else do you need? I mean, I've been to the fire training facility. I know kind of what they have out there. What would you need for a police academy?
Yeah, so some of the stuff that we need for a police academy is, for one of the more dangerous things that we train officers on is driving. That's where we have a significant amount of traffic accidents, and we don't have the opportunity to train that as much. We have to rent that from the state, which is out their post training facility that is out south. We don't have one of those, therefore we're not able to offer that training. Some of the other training that we need, where we would need the buildings, is a lot of policing. Is going to be clearing buildings or responding to buildings, where we would need some of that type of facility to be able to put on that training. It's difficult to do that within our Pioneer precinct. We have to kind of pretend sometimes that we're responding to a building and they go to a classroom. Whereas you take the fire training facility where they have actually separate buildings, a fire tower where they're able to provide some of that training because they have separate structures to represent the different training that they're doing. Those are some of the things that we would need in addition to a range, to be able to provide some of that training, to be able to certify other officers, to continue to be kind of that forefront of the training.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, some agencies have a campus type training facility where they have the classrooms, the armories, the ranges, the EVO, the driving. And then they have almost a mock town where there's several houses and buildings and they drive to and respond to. So something like that would be fantastic.
Okay. And then more talking about like, I'm really interested in having officers that are getting college degrees, or at least, you know, even if it's an associate's degree or something like that. I know that's different from training, but does that fit into any of this discussion at all? And if so, where does it fit in?
Let's go, Councilmember. That's a great question. Let's go to the next slide. It might be on the next one. We can kind of build on that. And
actually, if you want to cover the career path portion first, that answers that, where that feeds into that, Chief.
We have, Councilmember Wharton, we have a career path program where officers can attend different trainings and get different certifications. Like if somebody is able to be proficient in a language, or if they're SWAT certified, or if they're certified to on a motorcycle, or CIT certified. All these different trainings add points. If you get a number of points, it gives you, there's incentives, small monetary incentives at each different level of pay. But educational pay, and I think Deb's still on there. We do provide money, incentive to have those degrees. But if we really wanted to make it a priority, we would put more money right there. As you know, like you don't have to have a degree, but an associate, I think you get $50 more. I think a bachelor is 75, a master's is 100, and then a doctorate is or a PhD is 125, 150. Deb, are you on still?
I'm still here, Chief.
Is that correct?
The numbers are something along the lines of what you just said. In addition, as we chatted about this a couple months ago, we actively support our officers in terms of financial reimbursements and incentives for getting advanced degrees. You may remember the briefing we did on that. I don't remember. It feels like it was just a couple months ago. It might have been longer. But at that time, I think we identified 450 individuals in the PD who, over a period of 5 years, had availed themselves of that tuition reimbursement. As we are able to continue to recruit and have educational attainment support that's certainly something that we're looking for ways to make it happen.
Do we, have we talked to, SLIC or University of Utah about, first of all, do we offer tuition reimbursement, or is it just like a tuition discount, or is it full reimbursement? And what's that situation like?
It's full reimbursement, and Salt Lake Community College and the University of Utah are both one of an array of institutions that our individuals will go to. We offer the benefit up to the maximum allowed by the IRS, and it counts for books, fees, and tuition.
Okay, and how can we get more officers to be interested in this? Is it that they don't have time between their duties as an officer to be pursuing a degree at the same time, or what are the other barriers as to why officers don't utilize this?
I can speak to that from an HR perspective. From an HR perspective, what we have always found is that supervisors are typically very willing to work with an individual who wants to go and pursue a degree. And as you know, council member, options for pursuing advanced educational attainment have changed and become, there's lots more options than there used to be, as I'm sure you know. Chief, I'll let you answer that specifically.
No, that's we should really look at that, because I think it's more and more those advanced degrees are being sought after as we hire officers. I think we get a higher caliber officer. I think, though, not only should we probably look at, the tuition reimbursement is great, and working with people on their schedule to do that. But if they have those degrees and we hire them, we ought to incentivize that a little bit more to make it more of a priority. And then you would attract people that already have those degrees, through the front door before they even start in the academy. That's a great point.
Chief, just one thing too that I didn't mention. Individuals with associate's degrees or bachelor's degrees receive a preference when they apply with us. So that's also a factor that we're working on as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Let's go to the next slide. I think our time is running short, and I don't want to leave Deb with no time, but just a couple things I want to touch on. Ben talked about the TI machine that the council bought us 5 years ago. It was a great machine, but in technology years, it's ancient and antiquated. It's worn out, and the cost of upkeep is almost, it's very expensive to keep it up. Virtual reality training is where we need to go. Those are the goggles. There you can have, endless scenarios. You can branch them to successes. You don't have to have a room dedicated to the machine. You can use any room. You can take them anywhere. And so we would love to explore the possibility of obtaining that type of training system, because it really does induce almost the real-time training that an officer may see on the street. The adrenaline, the anxiety, it's the way to go. Alma, do you have anything on that?
I think that covers it. A big point would be the storage of it. We don't have a space to store a lot of this stuff. We're at our max at Pioneer. But a virtual, we were talking about it today, a virtual training platform. You can go anywhere. You can go in a parking lot. You can go in a room and set it up like you would having that machine dedicated to a room. So,
Any questions on that? Next slide. Alma, do you want to just briefly touch on some of the
Sure.
required training that we have?
Yeah. So we'll cover this really quick. Like we mentioned earlier, there are 40 hours throughout the year that an officer has to maintain. These are post requirements, with some of those requirements being recertifying on your taser, OC, baton, firearms, defensive tactics. Those are things that post requires that we have to put into that trimester training that we go throughout the year. This year, we also had some legislative requirements that came out with no less than 16 hours of training dedicated to a focus on mental health, crisis intervention response, arrest control, de-escalation, as well as another House bill that deals with mental illness, autism spectrum disorder, and other neurological and developmental disorders. So those 16 hours would be incorporated into the 30 hours of trimester training that we have throughout the year. There's also several specialties throughout the department where they have to maintain additional certifications or training. With some of those dealing with crisis intervention, specialty impact munitions, bias-based policing. This is additional training that we're trying to offer to the officers, trying to get out to them. That would be in addition to the 40 hours of training that they're expected to maintain throughout the year.
And then council, just real quick, House Bill 162 dealt with mental health CIT training. When it became a recommendation from the rep, we scheduled 5 academies this year so that we could catch up everybody that wasn't certified in CIT or to recertify them. That's a huge undertaking. That's 5 40-hour classes that we're spacing out throughout the year. And so that'll be completed by the fall. And then the sensory needs, the autism training, we just became the first public safety or organization in the world to have that type of training, and we did that through Culture City. So in true Salt Lake City fashion, we're leading the way. And the last slide.
All right. As with everybody in the world, there was an impact on training for officers with COVID. Some of those impacts were trainings were canceled, or more specifically, attendance was limited to provide the safe distancing protocols. What will happen with this is there will probably be a difficulty of getting some of those officers their 40 hours throughout the year because so many trainings got canceled or the attendance was limited. We're pushing some trainings out. We're trying to accommodate those officers, but that has been a pretty big impact on training, is maintaining those hours. Another large impact has been the move to online training is what we were able to do as we canceled some of these trainings. But as we've talked about, the majority of police training is not suited for online training. It's more hands-on. We need to be exposing these officers to the different scenarios, and that's very difficult to do with an online setting. So that has impacted some of the training value and the efficacy of the training that was provided. We are excited to be getting back to more of these trainings to be able to catch up with some of the trainings that we weren't able to do over the last year. But there is a bit of a hurdle of overcoming that with the 40 hours for those officers.
And then just to kind of wrap it up, again, a lot of the training that we want to do is impacted by our limited staffing. But I want you to know, last August when the mayor introduced the executive order on use of force, we asked for volunteers throughout the department. We had well over 40 officers step up and basically spend a month's time reviewing the use of force, the different policies. And I remember, Alma, you were one of them. And in those conversations, it really came down to our officers said, look, we want this training. But Chief, we only get 40 hours a year. We'd love to have 200. And so I want you to know, Council, that your police department wants this training. They seek this training, and it's important to them because it's important to serve our community at the very highest level. So thanks for your time, and any questions?
Council members, any questions? Okay, I think that Deb is up next.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I understand, Ben, that the person we asked to put up the slides is Bobby. Thank you, Bobby. So, council members, I'm just going to take just a few minutes. We have just a few slides to talk about the differences in the promotional processes since the elimination of the CSC. So, Bobby, if you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. So, just as you all recall, I'm certain, the old procedures, which were governed by the Civil Service Commission, have been were replaced in early January, and the new rules about how promotional processes in PD would take place were put into place in February of 2021. That they went into effect at the same time when the rules went into effect about how hirings would be done, so that both of them went into place at the same time. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So what I'm going to just take a few minutes about and talk about is what have been the improvements and advantages we've seen from that. And when I prepared the slide, I was really into explaining advantages and using E words. So you'll notice that the major advantages, I'll start with E. Really that boils down to conversations we've had about this before, conversations we had when the CSC was going away, when the largest advantages really come in terms of efficiency, because we can be more timely, we can conduct process in a greatly reduced time frame. We greatly expanded eligibility, as I expect you all remember, while we continue to provide opportunity and preference for our internal employees when it comes to promotions. The rules that went into effect in February allow the department to recruit for external applicants for promotions above sergeant. And then finally, the rules allow the hiring official, which was expanded to be not only the chief, to choose from a larger and more diverse field. And I'm going to say a little more about each one of those in the next 3 slides. So next slide, please, Bobby. So under the CSC, this is a side-by-side comparison. I thought that maybe that would be helpful to kind of illustrate the difference in the process. So under the old rules, an applicant for promotion and really the entire promotion had to wait for multiple stage approvals from the CSC. So, you know, the first stage would be done, approval would have to be sought, next stage could commence, and so on. And as the slide notes, the CSC had to approve all the details of each and every promotion process in advance, even when a similar process had been conducted previously. So what's our new improvement? The process for the applicant is much more timely. The promotional process can commence when the chief or the designated hiring official determines there's a need to fill a promotion. Human resources, as it always did, and this is important to note, human resources always has conducted these processes, and we continue to do so. The enhanced benefit is that the promotion processes can be completed in a timely manner, and we can fill those essential leadership positions much faster than we used to. I'll say more about that in a minute. Next slide, please. So there we go. Thank you. So as you may recall, an individual who was an applicant for promotion had to be an existing employee in the Salt Lake Police Department. And that meant that leadership was drawn from that internal pool of candidates. While there were once in a while rare exceptions to that, by and large, and especially when it came to exclusively when it came to sworn positions, promotions were drawn from the same internal pool of applicants. Now, the improved process means that an applicant for any promotion above sergeant can be external, and to include inclusivity and diversity of all sorts, the promotional process can include internal and external applicants. So what does that mean? Recently, well, since the council approved the titles of 3 new appointed positions for PD mid-March, recruitments commenced the day after that approval was given. The promotions or the positions opened. As of right now, well over half of the applicants we have for those 3 senior positions, and you may remember what they were. There's a deputy chief position, which was actually one that was already on the appointed pay plan. The ones that were added were an internal affairs administrator and a senior communications position. I'm pleased to tell you that well over 50% of the applicants were external, which means we're having a look at a much bigger, much more diverse pool of candidates. We're feeling really happy about that. That was one of our goals, as you know. Next slide, please. And then finally, under CSC rules, the chief, who was the only person who could make a promotional decision, selected from 5 candidates. And that was after the candidates had completed exam modules. And I've listed the exam modules just as a reminder. So what would happen is the position would open. As I said, multiple stages of it had to be approved by the CSC. Each of the candidates for promotion would complete one or more, typically more than several of those exam modules. And then at the end of the day, the decision had to be made by the chief. One of the disadvantages, particularly with that, is that where the promotional and the hiring process are so structured, and scores are given to the candidates and the applicants based on their successful completion of each of those pieces. Sometimes one candidate's ranking could be separated by 1/100th of a point. So under the new rules, an applicant for promotion can be selected by a hiring official, and I can talk a little bit about the benefits of not having all hiring decisions being made by the chief in terms of administrative buy-in by all ranked members in the police department. Now, that hiring official can choose from 20 candidates once the promotional testing is completed. Again, the exam modules will potentially include many and a couple more of the things that they used to. Ranking is still done on a very precise manner, but the hiring official gets to select from a much more diverse pool because it's larger, 4 times as large. Any questions? I think the next slide will just say that. Any questions? Thanks very much. Thanks for letting us talk about it for a minute.
Thank you, Deb, and I really appreciate that update. I think it meets the goals that I think the council had in mind when we were relooking at the CSC and getting rid of it. So, Madam Mayor.
Thanks for giving me just a second. I know I didn't plan to speak, but I want to thank the council too for taking the action that you did months ago to remove the CSC and put in a far more appropriate path for that, as Deb's talked about this, the applicants, the department itself, the people and the public that we serve is better because of this new approach and our ability to even create the kind of cultural change that Chief talked about with Alma by having a broader pool of applicants for those above sergeant level. So thanks, council, because this has been on the list of many a past administration and never accomplished until now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, Chief and Deb, thank you so much for joining us today. And Detective Sweeney, Officer Sweeney, Sergeant Sweeney?
Lieutenant.
Lieutenant Sweeney. I never get it right, ever. Thank you for joining us, Lieutenant. I know that we just started a little before 4 and we've only been at it an hour and a half, and we're still a little bit behind schedule, but we're only about 10 minutes behind schedule. I would like to take a little break. I think if that's all right with everyone, it's been a long day for a lot of us, and just to, like I said before, my judge calls it a comfort break. Go get your water, come back in about 5-ish minutes, please. Thanks, everyone. to it, shall we? Thanks everyone for, mostly the public, for bearing with us. It's kind of been not on schedule. Apologize for that. We are on agenda item number 5, which is budget amendment number 8. This is set for a briefing. I believe we've had, Ben, didn't we have a briefing on this?
It was bumped from April 20th, Madam Chair, because of the verdict being announced during the council meeting.
That's correct. Well, so this is our first briefing on this. We are set to hold the public hearing tonight and take potential action on May 18th. I have Ben Ludke from the council office here, and Mary Beth Thompson, the chief financial officer, along with Chief Brown if there are questions on certain items. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Ben.
There are 3 items proposed by the administration. They total $2.4 million. There's also 1 potential council added item. If all the items are approved, then fund balance above the 13% minimum target would be $7.2 million. And we have a sales tax update from Mary Beth. Bobby, can you put the PDF up on the screen? And I'll turn the time over to Mary Beth to give an update. So that is for a later item in the budget amendment. Nope, that's not it either. I'll screen share it. I've got it on my computer. Looks like I don't have sharing privileges though. There we go. Can you see that?
Good evening, council members. So we received this update, I think, last week on our sales tax. As you can see, sales tax is coming in still fairly well. It's at about 10.5% above budget, which is terrific. You can see that our February numbers, which we received at the end of April, we received $811,000 higher than what we did in fiscal year 2020. That was, for some reason, in fiscal year 2020, our February number was significantly low. Not sure why, but it almost was like that was the start of the pandemic for sales tax. And then the rest of it we've projected out, projecting a budget up about 6.6 million. So that's where it will come in. And our budget's at 62 million. So it'll be about 4.9 million above budget. The areas that are keeping us or increasing are retail, trade, wholesale, and manufacturing, and obviously accommodations and food is still significantly decreased, as well as real estate and rentals. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Council members, did anyone have questions? Sorry, I didn't ask. I just shook my head because I didn't hear anyone. Okay. Ben, thank you, Ben. You read my mind. With that, Ben, were there other things you wanted to talk about? before we get into any discussion from council members?
There are the 4 items for me to go through, but that was the only general budget update.
Perfect, thank you. Go ahead, Ben.
The first item, A1, is a request for $315,000 from the holding account created in the last annual budget, which has a balance of $2.8 million, to hire 12 lateral police officers. Lateral officers are ones that are already certified and working as police officers at another law enforcement agency. The administration indicates there's an urgent need for this class to address the current prolonged reduced staffing of officers available to respond to calls for service. Bobby, could you put attachment 1 back up on the screen? Chief Brown has 3 charts in this attachment that are talking about the urgent need for this class. That's the one.
Thank you, Ben. Council, again, thank you for your time this evening, and I'll be quick. 2020, I don't need to tell anybody, especially you, what a difficult year that was, but it had an impact, an unintended impact on law enforcement. Everybody was thinking that with the pandemic, the working from home, Teams, WebEx, virtual school, or online schooling, that there wouldn't be much movement in the city, or that perhaps calls for service would go down. Contrary to that thought, calls for service during 2020 went up. If you look at the 3-year average, so if you look at 17, 18, and 19, 2020, calls for service went up 19%. That's 19,710 more calls for service than we averaged in the 3 previous years. That trend continued. If you look at the bottom, we looked at January and February, and this snapshot in time is what we were calculating when we were talking about these things. But if you look progressively, the calls for service have continued to go up through those years and even into this year. I took a snapshot through our CompStat model. We look at calls for service every week to determine the impact, what's happening, what's working, what's not. And we looked at it just to kind of validate the information, but the week of March 1st through the 7th, calls for service that week were up 26%. The week of March 29th to April 4th, they were up 25%. So week by week, we kind of track these things, and they continually are rising and rising. If you look at the top graph there, separations, retirements, and resignations, you start with 2016, and you see that we had approximately 28 between those that we separated, those that retired, and then resignations. Last year, 2020, was the highest year on record. We had 8 separations, 25 retirements, and 36 resignations. And looking at this year going forward, we have 12. So at the pace we're going, we would have 72 if we calculated out the entire year for 2021. Another factor that plays into it is the department leaves by month. If you look at, and that graph is a little bit convoluted as you see it, but if you look, and I don't have my cursor, but in October of 2019, we had 25 individuals within the department take some sort of leave. That would be either admin leave, ERPL leave, FMLA leave, military leave, parental leave. Move that forward to October of last year, we had 70 people. And maybe you can show your banner, or Bob, you can maybe use your cursor to point to that October of 2020. And then thinking things may have calmed down in February of 2021, we reached an all-time high of 85 individuals within the department that are taking some sort of leave. So the impact is the vacancies, the staffing has had a huge impact on our ability to do the work that we needed to do. We've recently reorganized the department, knowing that the patrol is the backbone of our organization. We've again put more officers back to patrol to accommodate those calls for service that have been increasing. And right now we're to the point where we're asking for some help to hire some lateral officers so that we can, fill this gap. We do have 24 officers that we hired in February of this year that are in the academy. But there's a 22-week academy, like we just talked previously. There's an 18-week FTO, so we won't see those officers on the street until December of this year. The 8 that we hired in November of 2020 won't be on the street until October. So we're trying to hire a lateral class to fill that gap, or several lateral classes to fill that gap as we move forward. Another consequence that we're looking at is that because of everything that the officers were tasked with last year, the different events and some of the protests and civil unrest, we didn't have a lot of time for them to take vacation or holidays. And so they were able to carry those over. But Shelley Dietrich, she's on the phone and she's got another graph. But if we take the amount of time and calculate what officers have to use this year, that would be another 17 officers every day off on vacation or holidays. So any questions from me on that part before we move to Shelley and her spreadsheet? Thank you, Council. Shelley? Next slide.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Council. While we're waiting for the slide to come up, the data on those that use or lose time for vacation was from February, and we looked at it quickly, and it's still trending that way. We've been able to use some time, and some of the officers with some of that time has retired, but we're still trending at losing a lot of officer time during the period so that they can use their vacation time before they lose it.
There we go. Thanks.
I think that's attachment 2.
Oh, no.
It's a different tab, Bobby. I think it's 2 to the left of this one. One more over. Yep.
So the first top piece of this table shows what it was like when we were holding that 30 officers for that $2.8 million that went into the holding account. And as you can see at the bottom, the staffing after use or lose vacation and the classes that are unavailable, we had 406 that are available in March. In July, that's trending to 394. In December, it would be 378. So we're continually losing staffing, and the ability to get them out of the classes and back into the force is delayed there. So if you slide down, Bobby, on that slide. If we're able to hire and use that holding account to get some laterals back in for fiscal year 22 and hire this current year with that in budget amendment 8, that starts to bring our staffing numbers up. It still trends low through December, but then you start to see the benefit by March. Again, we're estimating that we're going to lose 3 officers, I think, a month. Which is low. We're losing 6 to 8 on average right now. So, but this just kind of gives you a quick picture of what we're looking at if we don't start hiring into those classes, and how fast that trend will continue to go down. And when we're out 10 months for filling those positions, it will create a huge gap in calls for service and the ability to respond to those. Chief, do you have anything else on them?
Yeah, and Council, I want to reiterate, a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was a month or so, Deb and I spoke about the hiring process, and I know the Council is very interested in what we're doing and how we're doing that. And I want to reiterate to you and let you know that we're not just looking for numbers. We're looking for officers. We're looking for the right officers. We want, and we'll hold them to the same standard as we look through their backgrounds and the testing processes. So we'll be very selective, but I think there are great officers out there that would fit the bill and want to come down here and serve in our ranks. So thank you for your time. Any questions or discussion?
Yeah, Ben, can you clarify about the 2.8 million and where that holding account that money came from? And then my recollection, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, is there was some intent from the council behind that holding account and that 2.8. And so can you just clarify that? And for council members that are wondering why I'm asking these questions, I can explain in a minute, but that would be after there are other questions. But Ben?
The 2.8 million has two sources. The 800,000 is from holding positions vacant throughout the year. This was part of the hiring freeze. Now, the number of vacancies was greater than anticipated. So the 800,000 is what was expected at the start of the fiscal year. And of course, the experience to date, as the chart Chief discussed showed, was significantly more than that. So the 800,000 vacancy savings. The 2 million is the amount that the department dropped to fund balance. I believe it was in fiscal year 19. And so because the 2 million was dropped to fund balance, that was the basis for pulling the funding and putting it into the holding account since it wasn't needed in that particular fiscal year. Does that make sense? Questions on the funding sources? Okay.
That makes sense. Thank you. Are there questions about this item, council members?
I was going to add, Madam Chair, that the intent of the council was to hear feedback and recommendations from the Racial Equity in Policing Commission, as well as the findings and recommendations of the council's audit of the police department. Those two sets of recommendations, as well as the council's priorities, were the basis, the intent to use that holding account funding. Of course, we just got the draft audit report, and we know more recommendations are coming from the REP Commission. So it's a shifting spot.
Thank you. Chris, did you have a question?
Yes. So I wasn't fast enough writing down all the numbers. So if we have the officers that will come online in December, I think was 25, and then 8 coming on in October. And how much are we looking for in this class, and does this lateral class, and what will that bring the total number to as compared to 2019? Does that make sense? Like, are we going to end up with more officers than we had in 2019?
The request in this budget amendment, the lateral class, would be 12 additional officers.
Okay.
I don't know if that's more than 2019. I doubt it.
Madam Chair? Can
Yes.
I ask a question of sorts? I think that characterizing those as additional officers isn't accurate because we're still trying to rebuild to normal staffing levels, and characterizing them as additional officers sounds like it's a growth of the department when in fact we're in a great deficit.
Yeah, Mayor, just real quick to just that point, we ran the vacancies that we had today, and there are 66 PCN vacancies that we have. 20 of those are the unfunded vacancies that the council allowed us to have several years ago, which puts our vacancies at 46. So if you take the 46 that we have vacant, the 20 4 that we have in the academy, the 8 in the smaller academy, we have 78 officers that are not on the street. So the 12 would be part of that 46 that we're trying to replenish, just like the mayor talked about.
Okay, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. That's what I'm trying to understand when I'm saying like this class, in addition to the 25 class, is that still just in the building up phase, or does that put us in the distinction that the mayor pointed out, putting us in the more than we had in 2019? And
Chris,
so I think that answers my question now.
Yeah.
can I?
That's what I meant by addition. Yes.
Sorry, Chris, can I piggyback on what you're saying, because it seems confusing a little bit. So there's 24 in one academy, 8 in another academy, and 12 being asked for right now. That's a total of 44 if I do simple math.
We had 26, but we lost 2 of them over the last, so it's really 24 now, and the 8.
And then 12.
Well, okay, yeah. But if you take the 66 vacancies we have, subtract off the top the 20 unfunded, so that's 46 vacant officers that we have, that there's nobody working in those spots. So if you take off the 24, if you take off the 12 from the 46, that's 34 officers. So we can still hire the 12 laterals and still be in the vacancy of 34.
Council members, there are other questions?
Well, and it's the vacancy of 34 down from 2019, is that right? Or is it?
From our authorized staffing levels, yes.
Okay, so, and then my second question is, and I'm asking this more for the public, because I know the answer, but I want you to talk about this for the benefit of the public. What you asked the rep commission about this, and what was their recommendation and response?
Councilman Warden, we spent probably a good half hour, 45 minutes, maybe even up to an hour, talking with the rep commission and explain the situation, and with some of the recommendations that the rep is making to move into a co-responder model, and some of the things that they're looking at. Training is a big component of what they're looking at, and we just spent almost an hour talking about how important training is if you're really going to move the needle, and if you're looking for police reform and changing a culture, that's where you start. And so they were 100% supportive.
Okay. And I just think that it's important to know that, because when we were last year talking about the reforms and making the commitments that we made to lead out and to really and to elevate the voices of the communities that have traditionally been underserved by police, or that Black and brown voices in particular. I want people to know that we're maintaining the commitment to elevate those voices and have them be part of this process every time we make these decisions. So thank you for making sure that you included them in that process, and for updating us on their response and your dialogue with them. I appreciate that a lot. And it's just something that I'm going to continue to ask every time we come through one of these requests. Thank you.
Councilmember Warden, it took me a while to find it on my computer, but on May 6th of 2019, we had 12 funded vacancies.
Thank you, Chief Dow. Lisa?
I just wanted to kind of add on to what Councilmember Wharton was just saying there. It was extremely important to us, and I wanted to thank the Commission on Racial Equity and Policing for meeting with us and hearing us out, and actually agreeing with us that our efforts to build a more just police department and the police reforms that you all want to enact are not in conflict. They're not in conflict with our efforts to address rising crime rates. So that's a false narrative. They recognized it. They supported us completely. And the letter that they wrote to us in support of this request, I think speaks to that. So I just wanted to thank them. I wanted to thank you all, council members, for meeting with us to discuss this issue. And that's it. So thank you very much for your time.
And just one thing to add, council, in true Pastor Davis fashion, the one recommendation he said after it was a unanimous vote, he said, Chief, we don't want just numbers. We want the right officers serving our community. And he said, we'll hold your feet to the fire on that. And so our commitment to him and the rep and to the community and you is that we'll get the right officers in here to serve our city.
Thank you. Council members, any other questions at this time? I would propose a straw poll on this item. The item is $314,899. That's the request. The request is that it come from the 2.8 million holding account. I've talked with our staff, and we have sufficient funds in the general fund to fund this out of the general fund instead of that 2.8 million holding account. As Ben mentioned, when we put that 2.8 million in a holding account, it was there so that we could implement some of the recommendations from the REP and the audit. While the REP supports the hiring of these lateral officers, and I appreciate their input, I read the letter from them, and certainly from the core commission group, appreciate their input. I think having the 2.8 maintain in that holding account so that other recommendations that come out of both the REP and the audit, we have money available to start quick implementation. That to me was what our intent was last year when we put that. So my straw poll would be that we move forward with this agenda item, but instead of that money coming from the 2.8, we pull it from the general fund. And I know chair people don't usually do motions, but I believe, and that we can do straw polls, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. So that would be my straw poll at this time. Is there any discussion to this on that? And everybody that show your support or dislike by your thumb.
Before we do, do we have any are there any concerns from or from the administration about using this from general fund? Like, is there?
Sure. Thanks. And perhaps Mary Beth would have a second to chime in also. I don't know if she's available at the moment, but this is a pretty blind straw poll without any council conversation about the context of the general fund. And it affects our ability to do other things in the city. And I think that it warrants a bigger conversation about the general fund as a whole. Also, I'll say that it's pretty darn hard to implement any changes in our police department when the officers are so understaffed that they don't have time for training. They don't have time for the maybe more the things that might be more attractive to council members to use the $2 million for.
Well, there have been conversations about the general fund, maybe not right this second, but there have been. And secondly, I think part of that 2.8 is to be able to fund extra training as it comes out of a recommendation from the REP, or to be able to implement quickly some of those recommendations. Understandably, I understand the need, and I'm not suggesting, like I said, I think we are able to move forward, and from the discussions that I have had, we have the ability to have this 300,000 come out of the general fund. Just for council members' knowledge, I have talked with our staff and have had discussions, and I've talked with some of you offline about this as well. but happy to have more discussion on it. This is my straw poll. I would love to open it up for discussion at this time. Mr. Vice Chair, perhaps since I gave the straw poll, you'd like to step in as chair right now?
Sure.
What about the, so I know that some of this is for training, for CIT and things like that. Sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Will you restate the straw poll first, Amy, just so I'm clear?
The straw poll is simply that we move forward with this funding, only the funding comes from the general fund, not from the 2.8 million holding account.
But for the entire budget amendment or just for the class of officers?
Just for this lateral class of officers. Just
And what's the total of that lateral class?
$314,899.
We're not talking specifically of a $2.8 million fund we're doing. It's only less than 400,000.
Correct. For the lateral class that's being asked of in amendment item A1.
Council
Just so we're
Chair,
all on the same page. Yes.
what I would say is that that's one-time funding for ongoing needs, just so everyone is aware.
But that's true whether it comes from which account it comes from. That doesn't matter, right?
The 2.8 is ongoing funding that we captured.
Right, but okay. But I'm just talking about the class.
The lateral class hire.
Not the 2 point, or not the full request of the budget amendment. Okay. Okay.
Councilmember Wharton, any more questions on that?
No.
Okay, anybody else want to discuss this before we throw a thumbs up in support? Or yes, Councilmember
I just have
Valdemoros.
one question. So let's say we do take it out of the general fund. We fund this lateral class, and will this be funding for 1 year of employment, or do we need to look at funding that in the future with other funds, or do we have a plan for that, or does administration have a plan for that, how we're going to continue funding these officers?
I'll respond, and Mary Beth could clarify if I don't get it right. That the 2.8 million was a part of the ongoing police budget. The council pulled that back. We still have $2.8 worth of needs in our police department in an ongoing way. That's why we raised sales tax with the funding our future years ago, so that we could have ongoing revenue. So the council's clawed back a portion of the like needs meeting operational budget for the police department. So if you want to pull in general fund dollars and keep the $2.8 million, then we're going to have to keep doing amendments to fund in the future this piece of the budget that's disappeared from the police at this point.
Cindy, can you popped on?
I'll try. Just a few pieces of information, especially since you mentioned that you talked to council staff. So one of the items that we had in mind is that, first of all, the money is all taxpayer money. And there are probably 5 different ways that you could fund every single thing in the budget, with some exceptions. But so the biggest question to me is, do you want to fund a class? And I think I hear that the answer is yes. And so now we're on to the logistics of it. And I get that there are some policy considerations, but what we were thinking of when we answered your question, Councilmember Chair Fowler, is that we do have money. The council's goal was 13% above fund balance. The, above 10, of 13% of the general fund as the fund balance. We have that, and we have $7 million beyond that. So to us, that says that you have a little bit of flexibility, $7 million worth of flexibility. Now, we don't know, maybe the mayor's budget addresses that in some way, but that's what we were thinking. And so ongoing versus one time, yes, that is an issue, but we $300,000 is not a huge amount of money. So it's usually something that could be figured out. Maybe there's another like one-time need that we can swap money for. I don't know. I just want to explain that we didn't just make up an answer. We actually were trying to be good, studious people. We weren't trying to do something incorrect. So I'll just leave it at that. Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Cindy. Sorry, James, I'll turn it back over to you as we kind of flip.
No, you're great. You have anything else, Councilmember Fowler? No. So let's just, Councilmember Wharton, you still have your mic on, so I'm going to check and see if you have anything else you wanted to add.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that I'm supportive of taking the 300,000 from general fund for this time, but like I hope maybe we can address as we go into the budget discussions how we want to do this moving forward, and maybe that can be a separate discussion from having to make that decision right now for future years. So.
Yeah, Councilmember Wharton, that was going to be my suggestion as well, is that when we dive into the budget that we can do that, because that 2.8 million that we do have set aside, that we have clawed back, we want to hear back from the rec and understand what they want to support and push forward as well to implement, changes in our police department. That's what we've heard about all night, is changes, and that comes with training, right? So I'm ready to field the straw poll by Councilmember Fowler, Chair Fowler. So if you're in support of this $300,000 and some odd pulling from the general fund, reserving the 2.8 million to be discussed once rec comes back, give your support with a thumbs up. I see everybody on my screen: Councilmember Wharton, Councilmember Valdemoros, Councilmember Fowler, Councilmember Dugan, myself. Let me flip the screen. You're looking good, Councilmember Mono. That's a unanimous decision with the District 2 Councilmember vacancy not here. So great, Councilmember Fowler, turn it back to you.
Thank you, James. Vice Chair. Ben, if you want to move on to the next item on the budget amendment.
Yes, and a note that the letter from the REP Commission is attachment 3 if anyone wants to read it. The next item is A2. This is a request for $117,000 from the police training holding account. The council created this second holding account in the last annual budget. The council's intent at the time was to wait for feedback from the REP Commission as well as the council audit about what trainings would be best to prioritize for police officers. The administration is asking to use the $117,000 to accelerate the pace of training for Crisis Intervention Team, or CIT, certification. Bobby, can you put up page 6 of the staff report and zoom into that table? While that's being pulled up, the funding would be used for overtime. That's how the pace of training would be increased. This is officers attending the training on overtime, as well as overtime for the social workers and the CIT instructors that teach the class. The data in the table is current as of April 6th this year. The police department already offered additional CIT trainings in February and March of this year. Those additional trainings increased the number of fully certified police officers from 110 to 179, as shown in the first row of the table. Those 179 police officers represent 35% of all of the police officers on the force. As you can also see in the table, there are a significant number that need either a 4-hour or a 10-hour training to renew the certification. There are 130 police officers, which is 26% of the current officer staffing, that have not been certified and have not taken any CIT training. If this funding is approved, there would be 3 10-hour renewal courses offered in May. This would be for up to 90 additional officers. There would also be a full 40-hour class offered in May and another in June for up to 50 officers. Even with those additional trainings, there would still need to be trainings next fiscal year in order for the full department, all of the officers, to be CIT certified. Are there any questions on the table before it's taken off the screen? And this is certainly something that we can track moving forward to show progress on this.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions? Dan has a question. Go ahead, Dan.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate that. And just probably for next fiscal year and follow-on years, I have to believe that all this extra recertification training is budgeted to keep us at 100% or close to 100% for all the officers.
The need for overtime may continue into fiscal year 22 because there's still reduced staffing of officers. And so balancing the need of having enough officers in the field responding to calls with making the officers available for trainings, they may still need overtime funding. Whether the department would have enough existing funding to cover that, I can't say right now.
Okay, but the idea that the full training is going to be an ongoing process for future fiscal years.
Yes, the department is requiring CIT certification and maintaining that certification for all officers. So this would be something built into the regular rotation of trainings moving forward so that all officers have and maintain it.
Wonderful. I think that's a great step forward. Thank you.
I also want to point out that the CIT instructors are the same officers that work with the social workers on the co-responder model. So when those officers and social workers are providing a CIT training, there are fewer available to do the co-responder model when those type of calls come in. So that is a limitation under the current setup. If the council were to approve this from the training holding account, it would still have a remaining balance of $205,000.
Anna?
A question on this. Obviously, this training is extra super duper needed, and it's and I would like to. I mean, there would be a lot of reasons, but 130 officers not trained at all, certified at all. That's alarming to me. Like, what happened? Was it not? Why not? That's one question that I have. Why these officers were not trained? Then two, if we have low numbers on the people that will train on CIT, can we outsource the instructors so that those that instruct within our house can actually be doing the work that they need to be doing with a corresponder model?
I would look to the administration for a response to that. There are different CIT trainers. There are some on staff, as I mentioned, with the department, but there are also outside organizations that do CIT training. As to their availability, their costs, I don't know. We can look into it.
Chief, did you want to respond to either of those questions?
Yeah, Councilmember Valdemaros, good questions. Give me a chance to look into those 130 and see exactly where they are and where they came from and how they slipped through the cracks. They may have been some lateral classes that we hired that we didn't have the academy to get them through. So let me do some research on that part. The other side is we have a kind of a collaborative effort with West Valley and some of their agencies in the Valley where we to make up this CIT training that we do. And so they're helping out, they're providing as much as they can as well. This is a huge lift to do this. And so I think with the overtime and the way we've got this scheduled out, this would probably be the most efficient. If we were to ask somebody else to do it, I don't know if they could actually pick up that amount of work and carry it to where we want to be as fast as we want to be there. So once we get caught up, I think it'll be just a maintenance program for the new lateral hires, for the new classes, and then just the refresher courses. It won't be the huge lift that we're doing right now.
All right, thanks.
Any other comments? Okay, Ben, let's go to A3.
Yep. A3 is a request for $2 million for a donation to the nonprofit Switchpoint to create a shelter for low-income seniors and veterans. Attachment 4 has Switchpoint's original proposal. The funding sources are each $1 million. There are two. $1 million from the general funds fund balance, and another $1 million from Funding Our Futures fund balance. The purchase would be the winter overflow shelter, the Airport Inn at 2333 West, North Temple. Switchpoint would own and operate the property. There would typically be a public benefit analysis for the city to donate funds or an asset to a nonprofit, but this is satisfied by the budget amendment public hearing. The new housing would be 100 units with at least 25% reserved for veterans. The cost would be $415 per unit per month, and a deed restriction would be placed on the property to ensure long-term housing affordability. On-site treatment services for physical and behavioral health would also be provided, but these would not be intensive as one would find at a permanent supportive housing unit. Ongoing operating costs would be fully covered by the rent. The total cost for the project is $8.5 million, and this is split into two parts. $6.5 million to purchase the property and $2 million to renovate. Switchpoint has secured $1.75 million last update that we received. If the council approved this additional $2 million, then the funding gap would be at $4.75 million. Now, as I mentioned, these are not permanent supportive housing, but rather transitional extended hotel stays. The property is located within the Airport Influence Zone A, where residential uses are prohibited. Hotel uses are permitted when mitigation measures are taken, such as thicker windows to mitigate noise. So the rental agreements would be limited to 30 days, and there are not kitchen facilities inside of each room. If the project can secure full funding, then renovations are estimated to take 3 months. if full funding is not secured by June 15th, which is when the temporary authority to operate as a winter overflow shelter ends, then the current property owner may proceed with alternative development options. Some policy considerations for the council are if you'd like to ask the administration if using these same funds to purchase other properties in the city to create low-income housing was or could be evaluated, and how the 25 units reserved for veterans would be coordinated with other veteran-dedicated housing in the city, such as Valor House and Freedom Landing, among others.
Thank you, Ben. Council members, any questions regarding A3? I don't see any hands. Okay. Thanks for that, Ben. Appreciate you there. Council members, we are on budget, excuse me,
Madam
agenda
Chair?
item number. Yes.
Sorry, there's one more item.
Oh, there is? I only saw
There
three.
is. It's a potential council added item. Staff added this based on your vote to do ranked choice voting for the city election this year. And the funding would be for a public awareness and education campaign. The amount is $100,000. $50,000 would come from fund balance, and the other $50,000 would be to accept funds from external sources like the Lieutenant Governor's office.
Yes, James.
I just want to point out that I've had a couple, actually several potential appointees to this District 2 seat, and people who are running who have actually sat down with Sherry Swenson after the confusion that came about from our last discussion. And they said, Councilmember Rogers, you are right on with this. This is going to be a very difficult scenario going forward with this vote. Not everybody understands it. So I just want to reiterate that even people who are applicants that are going to run for this seat understand it now better than I think we do. So I just want to reiterate that I don't feel very confident at all in moving forward with ranked choice voting.
Thank you, Councilmember Rogers. Any other discussion on this item? Okay, we will move to our next agenda item. Thank you, Ben. We are on agenda item number 6, which is budget amendment number 9. However, considering that it is 6:44 and we have 2 other agenda items with people that have been waiting, we are going to bump BA 9 to next week. So with that being said, we are on agenda item number 7. Ken Anderson, who is going to be our new city building official and director of the Building Services Division. And Ken, we originally had you scheduled, welcome, thank you for being here and joining us. We originally had you scheduled as sort of an interview and then realized that you don't need us. So this is just a nice little meet and greet for you to introduce yourself to the other council members.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. And I do need you guys, really, I do. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce myself, tell you who I am, where I came from, just a brief history. I know this has been a long meeting, so I'll try to make it as brief as possible. But yeah, my name is Ken Anderson. I joined the city 14 years ago in January of 2007. I was hired as a plans examiner. I was promoted to a senior plans examiner, to a development review supervisor, and 6 years ago I was promoted to building services manager for the permits department under the direction of Ryan Goff. And I appreciate all of his influence and training and helping me to understand my role and being very supportive and helping me to be in this position. So, yeah, I am married, been married for almost 41 years, lived in Utah most of my life. and I should say happily married for 41 years. But you know, it's been a challenge. This last year has been quite a challenge for all of our group because of this COVID. We, believe it or not, it's unreal to think that we've had such high volume of permit applications that have come in. Right now, I don't think I want to take the time to bring up the charts that I provided, but just a summary. Currently, with 2 months left in this fiscal year, the total valuation of our projects that have come through the city is 2.17 billion in value, which is huge compared to other years. And we are on track to be approximately 11 to 12,000 permits issued this year. So also we have our permits, our inspectors, building code and civil enforcement, which is under my guise now. We have a good number of inspections that we do every year, and just happy to be part of that group and overseeing what they do. You have a dog, don't you?
It's dinner time, and
yeah. So anyway, I'm very honored to be put into this position. The public, do the best I can. I feel that I've got a good background. I've got a background in construction as well as mechanical engineering, and so the group of people that I have that work under me now are just exceptional. They do their ultimate best to be considerate to our public. We do try we set a goal to have our first reviews completed within a 1 month period. And I can say over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been able to hit that mark. And that's incredible for the volume of work that we have. Again, kudos to the people that do this job. So I have a work flow chart or an organizational chart I could bring up, but we have 65 people between building permits, inspections, and civil enforcement, and they're all stellar people. We are a regulatory agency, and so we don't make all people happy all the time, but we really do our best. And I'm here to field complaints as well as hear all the great things that our people do. So with that said, I know that there's other things on the agenda, and so I'll just kind of back out. But do you have any questions for me?
Thank you so much, Ken, and thank you for being here. We look to you in this position and excited that you're there and that you've been serving our city and continue to serve our city. Thank you so much. Lisa, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take a second and tell you how excited I am to endorse and support my friend Ken Anderson. He's an incredible human being on top of being an incredible public servant. So I've known him for a lot of years outside of the city employment and inside of the city employment. And he and I also share something kind of special, which is both of our wives are named Holly. So big shout out to Holly. Tell her hi for me. Anyway, I just really support you, Ken. I'm just so proud of you. You're perfect for this position. You have my full support. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure. Yes, and when I said you don't need us, it's because it's not a position that needs to be on the advice and consent. You got the job already, so it's congratulations. And we really look forward. Thank you for staying on, even though you didn't need to be here, to at least have a little meet and greet with us. Thank you so much, Ken. Blake, you popped in. Did you want to say something quickly? Or
thanks, Chair Fowler. Just would echo Lisa's comments as far as how excited we are to have Ken accept the offer to be our building services division director and chief building official. And it's always been great to work with him in my short time, and can't think of anyone better to help fill that role and lead that team. So just wanted to add my endorsement as well. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ken.
I just wanted to
Thank
say,
you.
congratulations, Ken. That's awesome. So glad that you're still with us and doing that work. So looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Our next agenda item is a board appointment to the Public Utilities Advisory Committee. Danny Sepernich, if Danny's with us somewhere, hopefully.
Hi, yes. Thank you.
Hi, Danny. So good to see you.
Nice to see you.
I will just ask that you tell us a little bit about yourself and what is drawing you to the Public Utilities Advisory Committee.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Danny, and I'm a transplant to Utah. I've been here 10 years now, and I live in the Avenues, where I've lived for 6 years, and definitely consider it home. I'm a lawyer, and much of my practice focuses on work for clients in the water industry. One of our main clients is the Metropolitan Water District of Salt Lake and Sandy, which Salt Lake City, of course, is a member city of. And I also focus on government defense. And what's drawn me to this position, I've been fairly active in the legal community for the past few years and have had a couple of commitments there that have ended recently, and am looking to get more involved with the community more generally, not just the legal community, but finding a way to give back and get involved with the community. And through the work that we do with our water clients, I know how important public utilities, including public utility infrastructure, is, and also recognize that it may not be the sexiest or most enticing committee to get people to be part of. And so that was one way I thought that I could contribute and give back to the community, is to participate in this committee.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danny. And you have been incredibly instrumental throughout the legal community. So I look forward to you bringing all that skill and knowledge and passion that you brought to the legal community and continue to bring to the legal community to our public utilities. Council members, is there anything else anyone wants to say? I see Laura Briefer if you want to say something after Chris.
I just wanted to thank you, Danny, for applying for this and stepping forward. I know when you take on these things that you are always really thoughtful and put a lot of time and energy into being prepared and to making the right decision. And I think you'll be a perfect addition. And I was really excited when I saw your name come up for this. So thank you for your service. And I think you'll be a great addition. So thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Danny, you will be on our advice and consent agenda later at our formal meeting. You do not have to log in if you do not want, but of course you're more than welcome to, and you're more than welcome to watch it. So thank you so much for being here. Laura, thank you for being here. And we look forward to having you serve with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited about the opportunity.
All right, council members, there is.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry. We are on to agenda item number 9, which is a written briefing. And
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I think Director Briefer would like to say something. She popped up.
Oh, sorry, Director Briefer. Thank you so much. I am currently being bitten by a puppy, so I was a little distracted, and I apologize about that. Please, Laura.
That's okay. I just wanted to also thank Danny for applying for this role. I think she would be a great addition to our advisory committee and help advise me on many issues related to budget and infrastructure and all of the water resource challenges and opportunities we have. So thank you very much, Danny.
Thanks, Laura. And again, I apologize about that. Okay, now I think that we are on to agenda item number 10, which is a report from Chair Vice Chair. Mr. Vice Chair, do you have anything? Okay, I do not have anything. Report and announcements from our Executive Director, Ms. Cindy Gus Jensen.
An abbreviated version. In your packet and online, there's a draft list of questions that we pulled out from your previous process when you're selecting a replacement for a council member, this time District 2. So if you could get your feedback to us or send in your suggestions, the idea would be that we get these out to the people who applied on Wednesday, or excuse me, immediately after this this closes the application period. Then the next item is just that during the budget, in order to help us turn things around, we need some extra time. So we won't be getting the packets out on Thursdays. We will shift and get them out on Fridays to you. So, and staff is available if you want to talk through any of the issues, or if you have questions or that type of thing. That's it.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Okay, we don't have a closed session, so our work session is adjourned. We've got 2 minutes before our formal session, so we may start about 5 minutes late, so FYI. Thanks, everyone.